Okay, it is 6:02, and we will open up a regular meeting of the Board of Directors for Mercer Island School District. We'll start with Section 1A or 1B, Establishment of the Agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? I guess during this, I should point out that we do have a couple things that were added on today. Is everyone aware of that? We have, under announcements, a new proposed draft language for public input, and there's a new emergency legislative position that's been added to Section 2D, I believe. Everyone's aware of that? Okay, cool.
Is there also that?
And then, yes, and so we were going to add that in. So that'll be under Section 2. Do you want to tag that onto 2B or 2C? 2B. So tagging on to 2B, this didn't make it in, so we just sent this over, is the draft language for letter to the editor concerning the long-range facility master plan.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry that didn't make it onto the agenda. Okay, with that in mind, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of approving the agenda indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Okay, then the agenda is approved as amended. Okay, so we'll move on to Section 1C, recognition, student representative on the board.
So tonight we are inducting and having the oath of office taken by our newest student representative, a junior at Mercer Island High School, Paul Noon. Paul, would you come forward, please? Please raise your right hand. It's going to be tough. You got lots of hands here. I state your name.
I, Paul Noon,
Having been selected to be a student representative
have been selected to be a student representative
on the Board of Directors of the Mercer Island School District,
on the Board of Directors of the Mercer Island School District,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties and responsibilities of this office
discharge the duties and responsibilities of this office
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
Congratulations and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
So why don't you go this way, and that way we'll take the mic. You can shake hands with each of the board members as you make your way to your chair. You might have noticed that our senior representative is not here tonight, so Paul, for his very first meeting, is going solo. How brave of him. And I believe Meghana, our senior rep, is busy at band rehearsal. She has another important duty there as well. So, Paul, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Hello? Okay, this is working. So I'd like to start off my report by first introducing my parents, Peter and Jan Noon. They're in the audience right there. So thank you for coming out. So school just started last week, and since there's been a whole lot of back to school excitement, as it has only been 1 week, we haven't really had the opportunity to connect with the middle and elementary schools so far. We're looking to get a student and an administrator at those different schools to connect with. So the majority of this report will be about the high school as well as the student perspective on the WASDA legislative priorities. So starting off, we've had a couple of exciting events over the summer at the high school, with the MIHS band playing during the opening ceremonies for the Boeing Classic PGA Golf Tournament, and the ASP Weekend Leadership Retreat meant to prepare our student government for a successful year. As the school year started, we experienced a couple of new developments. Our what was formerly known as Bridges classes have been reformatted to what's called Islander Hour, during which each group will be made up of students from the same grade. The school senate is also getting set up, and the goal with this senate is to get a diverse representation of high schoolers. The senate will act to support ASP and will also be a group of students that Megan and I can consistently get input from for anything that the board needs. The high school also has 92 new student enrollments since the beginning of the school year, the majority of which are juniors and seniors. Additionally, schedules at the high school are exceptionally tight, with full classes and students struggling a bit to get the classes that they need or are interested in. Despite the challenges, our counselors are working very hard on behalf of the students to help solve this issue. The first home football game happened last week with a win against Mount Link Terrace. Go Islanders. There was a great energy and spirit thanks to ASP leaders and Link crew leaders. The fifth quarter, which we've had some problems with in the past, went smoothly and successfully. Additionally, there are around 500 students participating in across all the 5 fall sports this year. It's exciting to see various student-driven projects and groups focusing on addressing stress and anxiety. There's the newly formed Snail Pals, which is a mentor-mentee program, as well as the idea for student and counselor talking sessions. Especially considering the focus on the whole child across the district moving forward, we think that we're heading in the right direction. So as again, it's only a weekend, and we haven't been able to gather as much student input, but based off of last year's input, as well as our perception of the student body's perspective, here are the WASDA legislative priorities that we students care about most. Number 14, comprehensive school safety. We believe that students want physical security, but also to keep a healthy and educational environment. Students shouldn't feel scared or trapped to go to school. Number 30, funding behavioral support services and social emotional learning. Students, especially at the high school, experience heavy amounts of stress and anxiety with the pressure to succeed and to get into the difficult colleges. We definitely want to focus on this. Number 20, academic rigor and equity in public education. With modifications to the crediting system, we want students to allow to pursue their interests while also graduating. So like cross-crediting, etc. And number 11, full funded staffing level. So this ensures and incentivizes the staff to better teach students and create the best classroom experience so we can learn and have a fun time at school. Thank you.
I'm still up. Next up, we would like to introduce 2 new staff members to our administrative team. They have actually been with us over the summer, and we are excited to have them join us, but we were not able to coordinate getting them to one of our summer board meetings. So I would like to welcome both Dr. Sue-Ann Bube and Beth DeGrace, also known as our special education department. So they're going to make their way over here while I talk a little bit about them. They were both hired in June, but again, we've not had the opportunity to formally introduce them. Starting with Sue-Ann. Sue-Ann has dedicated her life to education. She began her teaching career as a secondary math teacher. Statistics and calculus are her first loves. She began her special education journey shortly after her son Jacob's birth, as he was born both deaf and with multiple health impairments. Suzanne went back to school to complete her master's degree in special education and her doctorate in educational leadership, while also becoming proficient in sign language. More recently, Sue-Ann worked with OSPI as part of the State Needs Project to improve post-school outcomes for students with disabilities. She serves as the president of the Washington chapter of the Division on Career Development and Transition, and also serves on the National Committee to support increased enrollment options for students with disabilities. She's taught in elementary, middle, and high school settings, providing specially designed instruction to students with a wide range of disabilities. Sue-Ann brings with her a passion that all students receive the appropriate instruction, accommodations, and modifications in their least restrictive environment. We welcome Sue-Ann and the passion and experience that she brings to Mercer Island School District.
Thank you. Do you want to introduce Beth too?
Sure. Beth is our new Assistant Director of Special Services, and she'll be working right alongside Sue Ann, and they've already been modeling this for us, especially in this past month. Beth comes to us from Seattle Public Schools, where she has been a Regional Special Education Director for the Southeast region. Beth's a highly skilled educator and brings to the district a wealth of experience working in the field of special education. She has supported students as a teacher, a principal, and as a district administrator. Beth is driven by a passion for servicing all students, as evidenced by her work on Seattle's Special Education Task Force, which resulted in the implementation of a continuum of service. Beth takes a long-term system approach to strategic planning and change implementation. She is mindful to keep student needs at the core focus of her work while seeking student, parent, and key stakeholder engagement. Let's welcome the both of them. I know our admin team is thrilled to have Sue Ann and Beth joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beth and I have been working very hard since July, and Beth in 2 jobs for a while, to come to the district and listen and learn and build relationships with both staff, administration, and parents in the community. We've really loved the new mission, and we've been trying to model that as district employees. So instead of engaging students, we're trying to engage our staff to think critically about how to help the students. We're solving problems creatively and collaboratively together so that each student gets the plan that they need to be successful. So we appreciate being here today, and we're having fun, and we're really looking forward to our continued work with the families.
I think one of the other things is coming on board, I hear like the Mercer Island family. And I just wanted to say to you all, because I don't know if you hear it often, is I'm sure I'm speaking for Sue Ann as well, but it is a family feel, and you can feel it as you enter the island, and most importantly, you can feel it when you enter the schools, which is really amazing. I just got chills. So, so that is really a great thing to be a part of. And I had one other thing in that for Sue Ann and I, we are both very visible in the buildings. And so, you know, when she's talking about working really hard in our buildings and getting to understand the community and the culture and the passion that's there, we are in there seeing that, feeling that, and just weaving right into that. So it's really exciting to be here, and thank you.
Thank you both.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Up next, let's go to 1D public input. Do we have any tonight? Is anybody here like to make any public input? Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on. Let's see, we did the 1E, student representative report. So we'll move on now to 1F, the superintendent report.
I have several short items, so I will try to keep it concise for you. First of all, our English language learner qualification. We have active across the district, 149 students. The majority, of course, are in our elementary school, 6 that are waived, and 136 exited. So we are starting the year slightly down in our total number of students qualifying for EL services, and it's largely because we had so many students who exited by scoring in the level 4 or 5. Also, I wanted to update you a little bit on professional learning, because this has been the month of lots of professional learning as we get school started. So throughout the summer, we did have our IMS student teachers participating in a book study on grading practices. August 20th was our new special education staff training all day with Sue Ann and Beth. On the 21st, we then included all the special education staff in a kickoff meeting. On the 22nd was the Powerful Learning Conference. We were very honored to host that for the collaborative 5 school district. and that we had, I believe, 140 teachers who attended that all-day conference with an excellent keynote speaker, and I think it was 60-plus sessions that teachers could choose to attend. On August 26th and 27th, we had our elementary PBIS staff leadership training. Also on the 26th and 27th was our new teacher orientation. The 28th was a work day in classrooms for our teachers. And then on the 29th, we had our Instructional Technology Day, newly named. Previously, it had a couple of different names, but we really wanted to emphasize it's about instruction and how does technology become the tool that's the lever for that. That was also a great day with an awesome keynote with several staff members. I need to thank the crew, Andrews and Fred and Jamie, who did an awesome job in the keynote part of that. And then again, many, many sessions for our teachers to attend. The 30th was their half-day professional development for all teachers at their buildings, and then a pre-service day on September 3rd. This week, we had our 5th and 6th grade math articulation planning. I had the privilege of dropping in at the very end, and they were having fabulous conversation on how to articulate this not only across our schools but across the grades and the system as well. Today, 30 representatives of the school district, including staff, board directors, and community, participated in a Leading with Racial Equity workshop with our PSESD supporters facilitating that, and that group will convene again next week as well. And then on September 26th, we'll have our first letters professional training for kindergarten teachers, and you learned about that at our last meeting. So lots going on in the area of professional learning. I would like to publicly thank the City of Mercer Island, and specifically Fire Chief Steve Heitman. We have sent a letter to him and to the city manager from our director of maintenance, because on Saturday, September 7th, the on-duty crew responded to a fire alarm at Mercer Island High School, and right when they got there, they found a rain gutter had malfunctioned outside of the library and was actually flooding the space. Without hesitation, the crew corrected the flooding at the source, then took the time to move furniture and library equipment out of harm's way. But they didn't stop there. They also took the response to the next level by starting the cleanup process. They were removing the water using squeegees and wet vacuums before our school staff even arrived. These efforts saved the school district thousands of dollars in potential damage and loss of property. So we are very grateful to the City of Mercer Island Fire Department for their great work and support of our work. Go ahead, Fred, put it up now. We just, okay, we'll do this one first and then we'll do the other one. Sure. This is the newly released Washington State summary kind of report card format. We've talked to you about this a little bit with the WSIF coming in, so they have finally now got this in a format that is available on the OSPI website. Here you see the state summary. They've done it in kind of a graphic format that includes enrollment, student performance, engagement of students based on ninth graders on track to graduate, English language arts growth and math growth, number of students, number of teachers, the education of our teachers, average years of experience, and then a financial graphic. So here you see the Washington State, and then we also have the Mercer Island School District one for a comparison. So you can see we have some really great numbers to show. This is the first example of this, and so we don't have a comparison from last to this year how it will look, but much of this is taken from that WSIF report that we have shared with you the past couple of years. In comparison to the state, we are just about above most of the targets. Our English language arts and math and science achievement are outstanding, of course. Our students are definitely on track for graduation as freshmen, And we are continuing to move those targets in engagement as well. With our teachers, we are very close to what the state is overall in our education of our teachers and our average years of experience. Our number of students per teacher, you can see, is a little bit lower than the state average. And then there's a finance piece that's included on this as well. So this is all available. Any district in the state is a quick and easy link on the OSPI website. And I do have paper copies that I'll leave with you as well. And now the next graphic. Here you have our communications coordinator has been working to provide some graphical representations of Board Policy 1. And here is a first one after much input from staff as to how do we show these as all being interrelated for our values, vision, and mission statement, with students as the priority at the top and the values spelled out, as well as the vision and the mission. You will probably notice that a logo for our school district is missing from this graphic, and we will continue to use our current logo, but we are engaged with our high school art teachers and our students to have our students design a logo for our district that will embrace our new values, vision, and mission. It will be somewhat competitive. We'll be working with the students in the advanced graphic design and drawing and painting classes, and hope to have the process conclude in the early spring of 2020. That will then be a new logo for our school district that really does represent these values, vision, and mission. And that's everything on my report. Any questions?
Do we get a copy of this graphic? Is it?
I was going to send it to you on the superintendent update this week. I was going to send you a
Great.
digital
Nice.
link
Thank
to
you.
it.
It's lovely.
Thank you very much for that update. So now we'll move into section 2 of our agenda, partial governance process monitoring. So 2A is Board Policy 1800, Operational Expectation 11, Facilities and Capital Assets. I'm sorry, I spoke too quickly.
Good evening. So tonight we're bringing the amendment. It's the third amendment to the Peak Lease. 10 years ago, the Boys and Girls Club came to the district. Well, it's more than 10 years ago. Came to the district and sought a partnership in building the Peak. So the agreement that was reached was that the district would lease the land underneath Peak, as well as contribute $1.2 million to the construction of Peak, so that the Boys and Girls Club would have a functioning new home. As we all know, Peak has become a fixture on the island. Boys and Girls Club has a very successful before and after care program, as well as youth athletic programs, and as other engagement programs. The original lease that came out was 5 10-year periods. So the original period of lease plus 4 10-year extensions. What we've been working on with the Boys and Girls Club is taking those 4 additional extensions and turning them into 8 5-year extensions, so that we'll be able to talk with them more frequently about the terms of the lease, how things are going. The Boys and Girls Club, as a part of the condition of the extension of the lease, is making some facility upgrades and doing some routine maintenance as required by the contract, as well as working on a conjoined scheduling system. We're going to be trying to roll them into the district's unified scheduling system. Over the last couple of years, we've made progress in creating a scheduling system for all of the buildings, so that all of our facilities can be rented through one place, not rented, but scheduled for use by the community through one person, one staff member, and we have been able to leverage that extensively in helping the custodians be more efficient in their jobs, helping the community be more organized and have better access to our facilities. And it's been a great opportunity, and we're hoping that we can help leverage that with the Boys and Girls Club as well. So tonight we're bringing the extension to the lease to you tonight with a request that you approve the extension.
So we could lead with a motion to approve the extension, or we could do some discussion before a motion.
Just, may I ask some questions?
Mhm.
So first of all, thank you very much for doing this. My computer's dead right now, so I'm going to need to borrow a power cord. Thank you. What's the overall, the original length of the lease?
The original lease was for 50 years, so the original 10-year period plus 4 10-year extensions.
Okay.
So we've gone through that first 10-year period, and instead of having 4 10-year extensions, we're asking for 8 5-year extensions. So it's the exact same period of time. We're just breaking it up into smaller chunks so that it forces us to come to the table more often to discuss.
And so for clarification's sake, we're not extending it beyond the
No.
original? Okay. So really appreciate just keeping an eye on the facility and the lease agreement, and it's super important, and appreciate that observation and work. And I think just to call out to both our administration and to the board that we should remind ourselves and Malum Architecture about that facility as well as we look at the long-term needs of the district and the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The last page has Exhibit A on the contract, routine and extra maintenance tasks. It doesn't say on the contract, you just mentioned that those were things maybe that the Boys and Girls Club would be responsible for?
So under the original contract, original lease agreement, at the end of every lease extension, the district has the right to go in with an engineering firm, an architecture and engineering firm, and do a facility assessment and find out whether or not routine and extra maintenance is being done, that they're keeping up the building in a proper fashion. And so when we were getting closer to the lease being finished, we reached out to BLRB, and they came and did an assessment for us. They noted a number of things that needed to be maintained, and we've reached out to Boys and Girls Club, and they've been busy beavers getting some of this work done. Some of it was some rather extensive work with the fire alarm system, and some electrical work that needed to be done there, but they're in the process of taking care of that.
Thank you. Is that, I'm just wondering, am I missing something? Is it clear to those who are signing the contract
Yes.
who's responsible for those
Yes, it is.
tasks?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So this isn't the entire contract in its entirety. It's just an amendment to the contract. It's outlining the changes that have been made.
Oh, I see where it is now. Okay.
Yeah. Within the original contract, it very clearly spells out that it is the Boys and Girls Club responsibility for all maintenance items,
Mhm.
and that they are required to maintain the building according to
Great.
our standards.
Okay, thank you.
So I move we approve the third amendment to the ground lease and joint use agreement with the Boys and Girls Club.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Thank you very much for this work.
Okay, seeing none. All in favor of approving the extension of the contract indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions? No. Okay, so the board approves the extension of the contract. Moving on to 2B. Again, Board Policy 1800, Operational Expectation 11, Facilities and Capital Assets.
So we are going to add another discussion, but we'll do the item that's up here first, which the board can see is a memo that was generated from Malum to myself and Brandy Fox. And what we're looking for here from the board staff is looking for just direction in moving forward in the process with our contractor, Malum Architects, to start the facility planning committee community process. And so you can see in the memo there are two pieces outlined, and staff just needs direction from the board as to which of those processes you would like for us to move forward with. And as soon as we have that direction, we will begin the process as soon as tomorrow.
Are you implying there's two choices? I thought the group 1 and group 2 on here were just different categories within the one committee.
They are within the one committee. However, they do state that their experience is to have an appointed committee, but if the board so chooses to do not all of the positions as being appointed, their recommendation would be to appoint some and use some as a selection process via a letter of interest. So those would be the two different processes. One where all the committee members would be appointed, and the other where there would be, as listed in group 1, would be the appointments, and group 2
I
would
see.
be the ones that would express interest through a letter of interest. We would do advertising in the paper, on social media, via email to all of the different groups that we have email contacts with, and also on our website in recruiting those who would fit in that group 2 category.
So if anyone would like to kick us off, if you have a preference for one option or the other.
I think they're recommending that that we have applicants submit a letter of interest. I like that we've hired somebody with expertise, and I also think that that would be probably the preferred choice in the community as well, to have some interest expressed and people applying rather than just shoulders tapped.
So you're speaking about group 2. And a hybrid is also possible, where we have an open process, but reach out to key people and ask them to apply as well.
I'm just want to, so I agree with their recommendation in terms of group 1. I think the district is in a great position to be able to pull in those community members. It looks to me that their recommendation is, for group 2, is direct invitation, but if we want to do it by, quote unquote application, then do a letter of interest. I feel really strongly that there should at least be an opportunity for people to express their interest in participating. To me, this is like the open, not necessarily the open community, but I mean, these are the kind of at-large positions. We know lots of people, but we don't know everyone, and there's people with lots of expertise in our community in lots of different areas, and we just don't know. And we also don't know who might be interested in participating. I think we should give everyone an opportunity to participate to have the opportunity to present why they should be participating in this.
Yeah, it's also a pretty significant time commitment, and it's hard to, assume community members will have that time to do it unless they also have the opportunity to apply, and that'll cast the widest net. But I certainly think as a district, we could reach out to people who have been involved in the schools as well and highlight this opportunity too, and kind of have that hybrid reach out, because it's highly likely we won't know up front, and if anyone we reach out to will even be able to commit to the schedule.
mean, I think that's part of our responsibility to reach out, make sure that it's known that there's this opportunity. But, I mean, and I agree. I mean, I've talked to community members and, talked about that there's going to be this committee. And I think in terms of reaching out, really just communicating that there's this opportunity and, maybe on a personal level say, hey, I think you would be a great asset to the group. But just because either one of us or someone else connected to the district is reaching out to them does not guarantee that they're going to be selected. I don't think you're saying that, but I mean, I think that's our responsibility to reach out to people and make sure that they see it. We're all busy. We all pay attention to different types of communication. So one of those is the personal communication.
Director Jorgensen or Superintendent Kolosky, thoughts?
I don't know if this is the time when you might also want to talk about, as you'd notice in Group 1, there are 2 board directors that are representatives on this committee as well. So I don't know if this is the time that you would like to discuss who might be taking on those positions that are encompassed in Group 1. We do have some discussion later on about other committees, but that would sort of get the ball rolling on filling in the list for some of those positions, particularly the Group 1.
When does this committee start meeting?
We anticipate November. That's why for those open positions, we would be preparing, and we've done some preparation already, an ad that would go in next week's reporter to be able to get out the information to the open positions so that we can start on the timeline that was presented, which was the first meeting in November.
So the key point is it's before the newly elected board members are identified or even seated.
That's correct.
Director Jorgensen, do you have a preference?
I'm still trying to read this one paragraph about selection methodology.
Well, giving you a moment for that, I'll
Yeah.
turn to our student representative over here and point out that in Section 1, it does list there representatives from the school, current high school students as selected by your high school principal. Puckett, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that I think that's a good idea to at least give the students that will be at least using the facilities an option to, with Group 1, seek out an opportunity to become a part of this group or committee. And I agree that we should give community members the option to give a letter of interest or, show interest because they're the ones that matter the most, and that as good of a group, as good of a selection committee could be, we're never going to find the perfect group, and we need to give everyone the opportunity to be a part of it. So I kind of think that a letter of interest is a good idea.
Thank you for the input. And I'll always try to remember to look down here to include you. And if I miss that, don't be afraid to reach across and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I have some input. All right? Okay. Yeah.
So, as I read it, this Malim's suggesting if we're going to open it up to applicants, that be limited to those 3 groups outlined in Group 2, parents with children in the district, parents with children in the district previously, and just community members. So is this a binary decision, the Group 1 or the Group 2, or is it Group 1 with or without Group 2 added to it?
It is the combination of those two, because as you look at the top, it discusses 30 to 40 people that consistent attendance below 20 should be avoided. So it is seeking out potentially a larger number. Group 1 would be all filled by direct information from the district. So board members, representation from the schools that we would work with our PTA with, preschool association, et cetera. So all of those positions where it lists is 1 to 2. I mean, we would hope to get 2, but we might not. If we can get 1, that would be the best we could do. Another example is a city planning representative. We would approach I forget his name now. I was already told it.
Evan, I want to say
Yes,
Maxon.
Evan, who works in the city planning office, to sit on these so that as we work through the process, those things are already taken care of. Then combined with those group 1 that we will be reaching out to ask, would you please take this on, would be, I think they were described well by Director Lurie as at-large, where there's 4 to 6 who, if you fit into one of these categories that are listed there, 3 categories, submit a letter of interest. And if we have 15 in one of the categories, then we would have to narrow it down to that 4 to 6 number versus 15 in each of those 3 categories. So the group 1 and the group 2 combined give you that 30 to 40 member facility planning committee.
Thank you. Well, I agree with Director Lurie that I think it's a must that community members have the ability to apply to be part of this. If we want public buy-in to the outcome of this, we need to invite people to apply and attend for the position. And I think we also underline this isn't a decision-making body. I think it's what did we call it, or how was it described before? Do you recall, Director D'Souza? Okay. Advisory, or not even advisory, is kind of going through the process with the MALM, which is the experts at gauging public opinion and public will, and it has the technical expertise. So just something that kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable was the idea of the district inviting, but then also at the same time selecting. So I think we need to make sure that it seems like it's kind of a conflict with respect to those positions. I wouldn't want to see necessarily a formal letter coming out to ask X, Y, and Z to apply, because it seems like an automatic bias to X, Y, and Z if the district or the board is involved in selecting those people too. So I'm not sure how you do that tightrope.
The direct invitation from the district would be to all of those that are listed in Group 1. So we would be speaking specifically with, and I use the example of the city planning representative, known partners such as our Parks Department. All of those would be, we would talk, Ty and I will be busy reaching out to specifics within all of Group 1, whereas Group 2 would then be that open recruitment, for lack of a better term. Give us a letter of interest if you would be interested in serving on this group and fulfilling the member roles and responsibilities. And you can see they're kind of listed at the very bottom of the memo there, so that in and of itself will be part of the, here's what the roles and responsibilities will be. If you're interested in this, please submit the letter. And we figure we will do it by email to the superintendent and or my assistant, so that we make it somewhat easy of a process for people to be able to submit their interest.
Do we expect a questionnaire, or is it simply a submission of an indication of interest to our email that contains the guidelines of this committee?
The recommendation from Malum was really just to have it as a submit a letter of interest based on these roles and responsibilities of this committee.
Any other thoughts before I weigh in?
Do we expect to do a postcard as well as a reporter article, as well as publication on our website? How do we intend to reach, especially people not directly connected to the schools?
We had not anticipated a postcard. There is quite an expense to that, but our communications quarter has an extensive community email list that he will send this same ad, so to speak, to that email list as well, and ask them to distribute it to other community members. We will definitely use social media. This may be something that we consider using social media that we don't normally use, which would be Nextdoor, to put out this call to action. Thank you, Tracy.
One comment on if it was, I think there was a discussion about if it's a questionnaire or just a letter of interest. If there's a selection process, we may want the applicant to provide more than just simply a three-paragraph letter of interest, because I'm not sure how you're going to separate and make a choice. You might want to be looking at their community involvement, their level of expertise, et cetera. Because otherwise, I don't know how you're going to differentiate between 2 paragraphs of just a letter of interest statement. And secondly, I certainly hope that, and not everybody in this island is participating necessarily in social media or Nextdoor, so I hope we would make use of the Mercer Island Reporter for it. And I would encourage whoever's making the decision to think about Nextdoor, whether that's a positive or a minus, to participate in that, because I don't think the district necessarily has been weighing in on Nextdoor, and I don't know if it's necessarily been a positive thing for the community in general. So there you go.
Definitely use of the reporter. That's why I said we would be going out tomorrow, because Friday is the deadline to make next week's paper. So we have already anticipated putting something together tomorrow so that we could make that deadline. Just a reminder, this was Malem's recommendation. They felt strongly that it should be really just a letter of interest as to why you would like to serve on this. They really felt that a survey or a specific application was not something they had ever seen used in this process, and they really weren't comfortable with that. The 2 directions they really recommended were have all the positions be a direct invitation appointed by the district, or if you want to have people submit an application or a letter of interest, then it's the suggestion of 2 groups, one being appointed and the other group being this apply, which equals about 18. If you go 6, if you go max in each of the categories, it would be 18 total. And then I think it's about 18 to 20 in the other group as well. Depends on if we get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in each of those categories.
I just wanted to weigh in on some of Director Jorgensen's comments. I think it's great to have it in the reporter. I do think this is a good use of Nextdoor. It's a widely used social media app for a lot of different things. And even though some people don't like some parts of it, I think most people agree that it's really good to get information out to the community, or to find a lost dog, and some of the other things that people put on their post-free boxes. I think it does have a wide reach, and I think it is a good idea to use it in this case. Not in every case, but I think this would be a good example of when it could be really helpful. And I understand about the idea of a mailer. I think a lot of people might think that's not the best use of our funds, and for people who are paying attention, they're going to see it somehow on social media or in the paper. And for people who don't see it, they're maybe not paying enough attention and may not have the time to participate in something like this, or the interest. I also think that there is a lot to be gained from an open-ended letter of interest, and if they see what is needed and what the parameters are, I think people who are very interested are going to know how to craft a letter that's going to grab our interest. And I think the hardest part would just be if we have way more than we can fit. But I think that's part of what a letter of interest is going to do, is help us make some selections. So I think that's a good thing. So, but yeah, I do think going with at least group 2 as having people sort of apply, or by stating a letter of interest, is a better way than selecting the entire committee. So.
I don't think that, I mean, I agree with that. And I like the letter of intent idea as well. I don't think that, say we get, 20 or 30 letters of intent from parents who currently have children in the district. I imagine that's where we're going to see the most. It's just a guess. There's nothing that precludes us from then, sending it out a questionnaire to narrow down the choices if we want. But I think starting out this way and expecting this to be the way that we're that they're going to be chosen is perfectly appropriate. But I don't think that doesn't stop us from doing something else.
So at minimum, they should identify which of the 3 groups they want to be a part of.
This all sounds good. I think we're kind of narrowed down on a choice. Would it make sense to talk about, before the invitation is sent, to determine who is making the selection process and what it's based upon?
Yeah, I'm just weighing in on the previous discussion first. Yeah, I think I would be more into asking for some applications for Group 2 to provide some opportunity for members in the public at large to at least throw their hat in the ring. And I kind of see a consensus kind of moving in that direction of a application process for Group 2 members. And that's with the understanding that it's a tight time frame to do that. There's a lot of work and heavy lifting to do that. So an appreciation for that, and 2, the hope that however that selection process happens or whatever, that we're able to clearly kind of define that for folks of how that selection will happen. And then my last thought on that is with the equity lens is Nextdoor. I think this is a great use of that particular app. And are there other apps that different groups within our communities use to communicate? So communities.
Patch.com, I think, would be another one that it gets used.
Yeah, and some of our folks who aren't necessarily on English language apps but are utilizing other apps like...
or reaching out to organizations like the Chinese Association, the JCC.
Right.
We'll be sending it out to all of our listservs for an example being the Superintendent Community Advisory, which hasn't met yet this year, but that was set up with key communicators with lots of different residents in the community, and asking them to help us disseminate the information to all of those different groups, the Equity Advisory, all of those different advisories, as well as the lengthy email list that our communications coordinator has, that he will send it out to all of them as well to say, if you're not interested but you know someone who is, please make sure they get this information.
So it looks like the majority, at least, is leaning towards that application process. So then I guess the next question is lingering is, do we have an idea of who ultimately will make the selection? Will that be Malem? Will it be the district? Will the board be involved in that? And then moving quickly through that into the final question, if we want to address that tonight, as to which 2 board directors we would like to appoint towards this process, or is that something that we want to finalize as we move down this whole process? Is that's something we could do tonight potentially, or establish a time where we're going to do that?
Could ask for letters of intent or interest. But
Could we have a survey?
I feel strongly that at least one of the 2 should be a board member that is continuing on past December's meeting. And I could see arguments either way for the second board member either also being one of the continuing board members or being one of the outgoing board members to be replaced by one of the new board members once they become board members. So I could go either way on that. And I think we should try to do it tonight, even as part of our board liaison section. I just put some notes in that area that I think that it's good to look at the whole picture of all the different ways we serve outside of these meetings. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'd agree. Let's look at it. Let's look at board member selection as we look at other committee member selections. That's a wonderful idea.
I'm saying a yes on that. Okay. And then, so that leaves the only final point of discussion is the generally kind of how the selection process would happen for those applications. Do you have a idea on that now, or is that something that maybe we hear about?
I think we should look to our consultant for their input on the selection process. I know that they don't know everyone in the community, so we've had a discussion about some of the pieces on here, an example being representative from each school. When I was asked about that, I said I would work directly with our PTAs in working through that. So some of them will be very easy for us to say, here's who we're going to look to. An example being, of course, having our high school principal work for who the students will be. But I think on the selection process for Group 2, we should really look to Malum to say, here's the letters of interest. How would you like that selection process to start? Because we do need to start setting that schedule. I know there was a concern on their part as well that it does become difficult if, and I think they do state this in the memo, that if members come in after they've started the meeting and they've given a lot of the information, a lot of the reading, it becomes difficult if they don't have a consistent group that has the information as you move through the 6-meeting process. So I think that's important to consider, is that we need that commitment for it at the beginning of the process and throughout the process.
Yeah, I heard them as well speak to that, and I agree with that. Just whoever's applying, it is a commitment of time, and consistency and continuity is important. We have discussed that initially this was a board-led activity. This is a political potato, because it ultimately comes down to bonds in the future to pass in order to deal with many of these facility issues. And as such, I think we should recognize it's a political thing. And I think I would propose that Malum speak to the board after they've received the applications, but that the board make the decisions on those members. And that's just one proposal.
Yeah, I'm challenged about doing that in a public meeting, and what sort of rejection we see on the people who are not selected. So that it feels a challenging situation.
I think I'm fine with Malum going through and taking the initial look, but there are nuances that we or the administration might be aware of, where there's some that are more positive contributors than others that Malum isn't going to know. So I don't think it should be absolutely Malum making the only decision, but I think in terms of an unbiased first look, I think that's a great place to go. But I would certainly want, and I don't think it needs to be done at a public meeting. It's not like we're voting on anything. I think we can have, even the 2 board members that are selected approving it, or, approving their recommendations or of some sort. I agree. I mean, I don't think it should be in public. It's just not necessary.
then I think it means it's not going to be decided by the board. When we talk about 2 members participating in the decision-making process, that's no longer the board. So do we hear consensus that it's not the board? Maybe get to that.
We're elected. Eventually, the solution ends up coming from before the voters. We want to be as transparent as possible during this process, and I think we want to err on transparency. And so I do still think it's a board decision. Agree, we don't want to have an awkward discussion of candidate X, Y, and Z, but I think it can be done in a respectful way that can also encourage people to apply. There might be a subcommittee of 2 board members that could go through it and then make a recommendation to the board. But to do it any other way, not in front of TV, I think is starting on the wrong foot on this.
The other idea might be to have some additional ways of transparency. Are the names public or not? The entire list, and then who applied, and then the selection public.
It's going to be a matter of public record anyways. So
Not if Malem collects the information.
So if it's a record that's used by a public entity, whether or not we hold it or they hold it, it is still a public record. So just because it's in the possession of Malin does not make it a non-public record. The real question is whether it's used by the agency, just for clarification.
So if the name's already all public, then there's transparency in sharing that list.
I'm uncomfortable with that. There's some people in our community that are more comfortable being, public and not. I mean, it keeps a lot of people from running for board because of the discomfort, which does not in any way make them a better or worse or more productive, less productive part of the committee. Our work is all subject to public disclosure, but there's a huge difference between someone coming in and making a request and, advertising in the reporter, here's who applied and here's who got it. And I don't think that benefits anyone.
I would like to see the board delegate the responsibility for selection to a committee that includes the superintendent and a few staff members who might also serve on the committee, like a couple of principals and 2 board members. And I think that would be a nice combination of people who could meet in a private setting and evaluate the list and all the letters of interest, and then make a recommendation to the board that the board then votes on.
I think the superintendent will be creating a group to select the members of Group 1.
Correct. We have what's called, what are we calling it, Ty? The Executive Leadership Committee that includes Cabinet, our Malem, our representatives from Malem, our Communications Coordinator, our Director of Technology, our Director of Maintenance and Operations. So several staff members that will be also, remember that was that smaller group that Malem will be working with as well, that will certainly be generating many of the names for the invitation. Like I had to look to Ty to say, who's that person at the city that's the code. So we'll be working with Malem for that. And could certainly be a filter for if there are an abundance of applications beyond the 4 to 6 number in each of those categories that are listed in Group 2.
I'd like to support Director Drinkwater's suggestion that a subcommittee be formed that includes 2 board members to make that selection process, then to bring it back to the board for the board approval. That's how I understood that. So I might also suggest, and we may not get very many, so we may, instead of saying 4 to 6 on these things, we might want to go to 0 to 6, because if we only get 4, I don't know if we necessarily want to handcuff that committee to saying they have to take those 4.
I think some subset of the group who selects group 1 that the superintendent will use, and then maybe the 2 board members who are selected to serve on this might be the best group to help make this happen.
I think we're reaching a consensus there. I agree. I think if the small committee is meeting, that's great, going with that recommendation. I also think that, as with many of the other committees, if it is just presented either in the consent agenda or however that's presented, as many of the committees are, then the board and the public has an opportunity to see that ahead of time. If anybody has anything they want to challenge or speak to, they can. If not, then the process rolls forward. That offers some privacy to those, some semblance of privacy to the individuals on that. It's not a big open discussion, but it is also a matter of public record, which provides transparency.
But the full group will be transparent and public record, and in probably our board agenda item at some point.
You mean the full group of applicants or
No,
the
the
full
full
group that's selected?
selected group
Absolutely,
of group
yes,
1 and
yes.
group 2
That would-
selection.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think
I
that
heard, I
provides direction.
believe I heard direction, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Without officially taking action. All right. Wow. Yes, and so adding into this, and unfortunately it didn't make it into our agenda, but there is the draft letter to the editor / press release that Director Jorgensen and I worked on, predominantly Director Jorgensen worked on, and we chatted a little bit about it a few nights back. Yeah, so they're going to bring it up here. We
Can that get emailed too, so we could view it on the screen right in front of us? For some of our eyes need that.
And can you send it again one more time through? I didn't see it in the attachment the first time through.
We could also take a moment here, just a 5-minute bio break, everything, allow that to get set up, and anybody who wants to access it, that way we're not going through the process here. Does that work for everyone? Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess to set that. We'll be back at, let's just make it 7:15. Okay, thank you.
I forwarded that email address from a different email account. I CC'd my board account because I didn't have access to my board email.
Yep.
But it'd be nice not to see that private email address.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
You got it. Absolutely. Now that we're at recess, we're in good shape.
So at this point, everybody should have access to the red line or the underlined version of the draft letter. This, well, Dr. Jorgensen, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. So this is a kind of a sort of pseudo redline draft version of the letter that was presented at the last meeting. Brian and I met and discussed the changes, and Malum Architects was corrected. The next paragraph identified a point that Director Drinkwater wanted to point out, that the costs are being borne by the Capital Projects Fund and will not impact the yearly operational costs of the district. And then if we could scroll down a little further, we also just wanted to make note that Mary Waite Pool, as well as the other facilities on the mega block, just to be inclusive of all our facilities. We also changed from 18 months to be 12 to 18 months. And some of these changes we received from administration as well. So, and any other thoughts? Just kind of rewording of that last bullet. And then the other thing was there was a suggestion that we shorten that hyperlink, or link, it's not really a hyperlink. And I'd suggest we do. But I wanted to include the original raw data, so whoever creates that hyperlink can know where to go, and then they can kind of create a shorter link.
That's great. I just noticed the typo for enrollment in the second to last bullet.
Do we include the peak building as discussed earlier in
I think
this?
that's in the high school mega block assets and properties.
Yeah, we just kind of include that because we weren't pulling out the transportation building and all those other things. I guess we could if we wanted to individually mention peak.
We might want to. I don't know that there's an overall understanding that it's the school district's property.
Okay. So let's go ahead and add peak there. And then one other thought was there was some discussion about word length from the reporter, and we thought that maybe let's see if they'll accept this, and if they won't accept this as is, then maybe have maybe our president and or communications director reach out to see if they could do an interest story or something like that where they could encompass that entire piece.
Thank you for all your work on this. I think it's great. The only comment I would flop paragraphs 1 and 2. I mean, what we're announcing is what we're doing right now, and I mean, to go back to the history, I think makes more sense, rather than it's like, well, why are you talking about a bond that was passed in 2014? This is to talk about the long-range facility plan.
That's an excellent point, and I forgot to mention we flipped it, and now you're suggesting going back. So I think that's fair. Obviously, you know, that first paragraph is kind of nice in terms of on time and on budget, but probably shouldn't lead with it. So appreciate that.
I just think it's a great way to start off the history, and then, you know, what the facilities are and what's been done with them. So, I mean, I think it's got a really important purpose. I just think if we're announcing the long-range facilities plan, that's what we should be announcing.
So is there consensus to flip it there?
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
You could just start with the first line of the second paragraph, then go into the then go into the history, and then say what the goal of the long-range facilities plan is, and continue as is. So you do lead with the announcement that that's what we're doing. The reason we're here is because we have completed the bond, and here's what the next steps are.
I am going to take a little bit of a backseat here, A, because I've already put in enough input. I'd like to hear others. And second of all, this really isn't my bailiwick of real-time editing. So I'm going to take a backseat here.
I don't have a strong opinion. My only point is that I think, like, if it's an announcement announcing a long-range facilities plan, that's what should be first. But I think your proposal, suggestions, fine. I mean,
I like your suggestion of just flipping the paragraphs and focusing on what's happening now, and then mention the accomplishment of the 2014 bond, and then list our facilities, and then coming back to the plan and what will happen.
I'm comfortable with that.
And thank you for your work.
Are there any other suggestions, changes, discussion? Okay, so the next step would be, are you okay with this moving forward in either form of, I guess the proposed initial avenue is as a letter to the editor on behalf of the board. And if that is not, if we're not able to do that, to pursue a press release and another avenue of presenting that with the reporter.
isn't the reporter pretty open to, special, I don't remember what they call it because I don't look at it every week, but I mean, I look at it online, so it's different. But especially since there's no one assigned to the schools anymore, I mean, I've seen a bunch of articles that are, special from whatever, and that's actually an article that I think this falls under.
Yes, there is an avenue for that. And we could certainly contact the reporter and discuss the two pieces with them and see what they suggest.
I noted when we kind of started the discussion on this that just before primaries, the editor of the reporter did publish a piece basically outlining number of characters and what they would and would not print, and it might all appear online, but not all of it would appear. And so that was my only hesitation in a letter to the editor versus a press release. But I'm confident that it can be figured out. Our student, thank you. I was like, what? What are your thoughts?
Could you repeat the question?
We're kind of discussing, so our letter here, which explains and you're kind of jumping in on this one, the long-range facilities master plan, which we've been discussing here. And so this would be a letter to the public through the reporter.
I don't.
A response isn't required,
Yeah.
so we don't want to put you on the hot.
Right. It just looked like you had something to say, so I didn't want
No,
our president
I
to
was
miss
just
you.
trying to listen, but I don't have. I mean, I don't have access to the draft, but from looking at this portion, I don't have any input.
Okay. Excellent. Do you have enough information to kind of move forward with this? We do. Okay. Everyone's okay with this moving forward out of our hands? All right. Awesome. Okay, then we can close Section 2B, which means in the agenda we'll move on to Section 2C, Board Policy 1800 OE11, Facilities and Capital Assets.
All right. Tonight we're bringing the annual contract that we have with CPM, Capital Projects Management. That's our contract with Brandy Fox. She is our owner's representative and our project manager, and she manages all the construction projects, and she has a vast wealth of experience with the district and in the field, and does a lot of work within the K-12 sector. So we're bringing an extension of her contract before you tonight with the recommendation that we continue to hold on to Brandy as we move forward in the process.
So we can lead with discussion, or we can have a motion to approve the contract.
I move we approve the contract.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I think Brandy's been fabulous, and we, as Ty just said, we want to hold on to her with this contract. She's been an amazing asset as we go forward with all of our projects. So I can't see any reason why we wouldn't approve this.
I'd like to echo those remarks and just also say during the 3 years of construction, or 2.5 years, we got updates every 2 months, if not. And unlike many construction projects, we did not see all the challenges. She did not present us the challenges. She presented us the solutions, and just that whole 3 very large projects went very smoothly, and including work with neighbors, including the work with the city, et cetera. And I think at our WASDA meetings, I think many of us have heard from other school districts in facilities that how fortunate we are to have her working with our school district. So, thanks.
Agreed.
Agree.
Absolutely. Echo the appreciation and expressing the confidence that I have in Ms. Fox and the work and the services that her company has provided to the district. So with that, any other discussion? Okay. In that case, all in favor of approving the contract with CPM indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All against say nay. Any abstentions? No. So the contract is approved. Moving on to 2D. So this is Board Policy 1005, Board Officers, Legislative Priorities for WASDA Legislative Assembly. So opening that up before I turn it over to you, Director Jorgensen and our legislative rep, I want to just express gratitude to our student representative for coming with those priorities outlined for us. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd echo that as well. It was great to hear the student voice and the priorities there. So thank you for sharing that. So we have this packet that lists, I'm going to occasionally talk to our expert legislative representative, which is Brian. How many topics are there, subjects?
Roughly 123.
Okay, so we've all looked at this. I think our homework assignment was to identify our top 15 and go down the table and have you share those numbers with me or with us, and I try to keep a tally maybe. The thought I think was, do we want to try to prioritize these, or do you just want to just give me 1 through 15 for everybody? Thoughts?
I think what I suggested last time was to get everybody's 15, and then we'll see kind of what floats to the top, the middle, or doesn't make the list.
Awesome. I think that's how I remembered it too, but I was a little fuzzy.
And then from there, it'll either be sort of obvious how to rank them, or we may just say, let you decide.
How do we want to refer? We were doing, I think, our student representative mentioned the numbers, which I've got the numbers in front of me, as well as the titles. But if we go by numbers, that's going to be pretty easy for me to keep the tally. Has everybody got numbers with theirs?
I have the SLP or LP number, but I'd need to take a minute to find the other numbers. And I was noticing on the, I think Paul mentioned academic rigor and equity as being number 20, but I also saw it as number 1. Fully
That's
funded
correct.
staffing level is number 11, but then it also say it's going to be a new number 4. So I'm not sure. I think we definitely need to use the names as well.
Yeah, I think that's great to use the names as well.
Okay.
And the reason the students' numbers would be different, or student representatives' numbers would be different, is because they're from last year's numbers. And so as items were removed and things were shifted, they've all been assigned new numbers. And so the number 4, Tracy, that you hear for that, it's new proposal number 4, but it actually is assigned a different ordered number in the list. Yeah.
So our board member numbers will be consistent. So we probably, as board members, only need to give numbers. We can see which numbers bubble to the top and find the titles real quickly for it.
And yeah, if you could just mention the title
Yeah.
with it, just make sure we're all on the same.
Same page.
Yeah.
And to follow along, I don't know if it's helpful or not, we can go to wasda.org. Let's see, I think it's under events, and go to Legislative Assembly, and there's a next menu that says Handbook and Resources.
There was a link to it in the board agenda.
Yeah, or follow the board agenda. And then from there, it has the numbers and the title. And then I believe if we need to look deeper into the definition or the language of it, we can jump to that. Otherwise, I think the index at the beginning of that document provides both numbers and titles for clarification.
So, I've got a piece of paper here, pen. Does somebody want to go second now, since Paul's gone first?
Sure. I didn't have 15, so I'll just list the ones I do have. Number 1, academic rigor and equity in public education. Number 4, funding for graduation requirements, career and college-ready diploma. Number 5, linking graduation requirements to career pathways. Number 15, firearm-free schools. And number 16, gun violence prevention. Number 38, professional development. And 42, full funding of school employee benefits and pensions. And 64, fully fund facilities for mandated class size reduction. '73, levy authority and local effort assistance. I was a little confused by that because there was a piece that was passed, but 5 districts were not helped with that, so I put 73 down because I wasn't quite sure. It actually seems to refer to the old numbers, not the new numbers, but I put it down anyway. It is recommended to pass as well.
I would also point out that is up for amended language as
That would probably be good. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. The other interesting one to me, too, was number 98, limiting school district liability, and how we think about that in light of all the issues schools have today. And it might, public entities usually are their deepest pockets around when things go wrong, and something worth thinking about. It is put down as a due pass. It's as well. So I think that was it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm writing these numbers down, but if other people are writing numbers down, if anybody's using any other tool to do this, I'd encourage that because it'll be interesting to try to tally this up. But who wants to go next?
Not me. I'm still numbering.
I'm happy to go. Or?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I was just to say I'm going to have to go back and forth a little bit.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whichever if it passes down. I actually kind of put together a sheet. So there's one for you. And
Oh, cool. This is nice.
if for minutes or records reasons that you need a digital copy of this, I'm happy to send it as well. So my are in no particular order. I just kind of went by the listing number in the handbook, and I dropped on the far left. There's where it kind of fell for us last year in our priorities by ranking. The next number is the WASDA designation number this year. I've got the title, then the LP or SLP. And then I made a little note as to whether it's been moved to a new designation or if there's an amendment proposed or, yeah. And then the very last column for me is where you can find it in that document, what page you can find that on. So again, without any particular order, at the very bottom were kind of the remainders from last year, but I had academic rigor, which is number 1. We've had that already. 14, comprehensive school safety. So I'm not sure that we had that one listed yet. And we're signatories on that particular one. 8, gun violence prevention, which, oh, I'm sorry, 16, yeah. And the previous comprehensive school safety was 14. Yeah, I said that. So 16. Next was 17, K-8 world language instruction. This would support increasing funding and the prototype school funding model for K-8 world language. I think that's a new one on our list. 19, trauma-informed practices and supports for students. 24, which would be early childhood education and kindergarten preparedness. Deals a lot with funding. 27 would be English language learners. That was on our list last year as well, and that would deal with funding models. And 28 to go along with that. And I had 15 total. Enhanced funding for transitional bilingual education. Number 30, funding for behavioral support services and social emotional learning for students. It was formerly SLP 71B12, and that was consolidated, a couple of them, into this new number. And the title changed slightly.
Which one was that?
Number 30, funding behavioral support services, social emotional learning for students. And then number 33, special education and special needs students, which would address a combination of funding issues as well as, I guess, management of students. And then additional priorities for me that differ from last year's priorities for the district would be number 25, education and funding for gifted student programs. This would advocate for increasing the model from 5%, funding 5% of student population to 10%. 39 would be school employee salaries. So that's an equity issue with school employee salaries. 49 would be diversity training. 108, what seemed especially important to me this year, is immigration status and identifying that we wouldn't track or base student services in any way based on their immigration status. And then to round out my 15, I have number 11, fully funding staffing levels, and that's a new proposal this year. That might actually be that new proposal 4 that you were talking about, Tracy. So its official number is 11. And then at the bottom of my page there, these were just for reference, some of the ones that weren't on my top 15, but that were in our priority list from last year. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. This was very helpful with the printed out version as well.
You want to go? Either way.
Okay, so I left my list at home, so I tried to recreate it. It may not be exactly the same, but it's close. Okay, so I started with number 1, academic rigor and equity in public education. Number 8, equity-based education system. Number 9, expansion of work-based learning opportunities. Number 10, federal funding for civics education grants. Number 14, comprehensive school safety. Number 19, trauma-informed practices and supports for students. Number 30, funding behavioral support services and social emotional learning for students. 53, professional development. 68, full funding of basic education. 73, levy authority and local effort assistance. And I was a little confused on what was what, but my intention is that we have authority and that we not be restricted, that one of the 5 that's restricted at least. And so what if I chose the not appropriate one, then that was my intention.
If I can,
Mhm.
to provide clarity on that, so the amended language to that is referring to the new, it refers to the levy assistance of the state making up that difference up to the 2,500 per student as opposed to 1,500, which was the old law, and then it would increase. Essentially, the amended language wouldn't affect Mercer Island in any way, but it, and I can't pull it up here on my computer.
Okay.
But yeah, it would increase the modifier involving that equity assistance or the local area assistance.
Okay. 86, passage of school finance issues. 87, tax reform. 89, mandatory school age, goes from 8 to 6. 94, process to challenge. I don't think I meant to do 94. Hang on, let me check, sorry. I don't know why I picked that one. I don't know why I wrote 94 down. Oh, I think that was my same intention of just allowing more local control in levies. 101, state tribal education compact schools, and number 108, immigration status, I thought was important as well.
Thank you.
Before I go on with my main list, I'll ask this question, but I don't think anybody else chose it. I chose professional development, which showed up twice, is 38 and 53. Did you say that one too?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did, okay.
I said 53, and I don't.
Okay, oh, that was what we were saying, okay. All right, then I will include that in my list, or?
I think I might have included 38.
Okay. Okay, so those are the same thing, because they have the same SLP number. Okay, all right, so then, yeah. So the 38/53 is one. Academic rigor and equity,
Just-
the 1/20, yeah.
Just a favor to ask, if it's possible to
order?
go from
Yes,
1 to down
I'll
there,
do
that'd
that.
be great. Thank you.
Okay, so the one that is 1 and 20, the academic rigor and equity. Number 14, comprehensive school safety. Number 16, gun violence prevention. And number 22, CTE funding. Number 24, early childhood education and kindergarten preparedness. Number 27 is ELL, and there were a few that mentioned ELL, like 28 and 30 also, but I just picked one that I felt more comprehensive. Number 30, behavioral support services and social emotional learning. Number 33, special education and special needs students. 34, technology funding. So even though we have a really nice technology levy, I don't think every district has that, and I think it's hugely important around the state. And then the 38/53, professional development. 43, para-educator support. Some of the most valued members in our schools all around the state. They do so much for us.
What number was that again?
43,
Thank you.
para-educator support. Number 44, attract, retain, recruit high-quality and diverse staff. Number 49, diversity training. Number 63, school construction revenue. And number 68, full funding of basic education.
Great. Great.
which I would hope would include staffing levels.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay. So I went with number 1, academic rigor. I'm going to be extremely brief on these titles because so many of these you'll probably recognize. Number 12, protecting our students from gun-related violence. Number 14, comprehensive school safety. Number 15, firearms-free schools. Number 16, gun violence prevention. Number 17, K through 8 language instruction. Number 19, trauma-informed practices. Number 27, ELL. Number 28, enhanced funding for transitional bilingual education. Number 30, enhanced funding for SEL. Number 31, the Homeless Assistant Act funding. Number 33, special ed funding. Number 38, professional development. Let me just count. 1, 2, 3. Number 42, fully funding SEB. And 108. So I'm going to add our student representatives' numbers in the equation as well, if that's okay. You want to multiply it by a number 2? I'm serious. By 2? Yeah. Let's see. Well, I mean, I kind of threw that out a little bit lightheartedly, but it is the student voice. And do we want to put a multiplier there on that?
I think most of them, if not all
Are
I think
gonna raise
most, if
the
not
top.
all of them, were also mentioned by other board members, so it may be that they're just going to end up on our list regardless, so,
Thank you. Yeah.
or some version of them, like I didn't put full funding of staffing level, but I put fully funding of basic education
Right.
with that same intent. But I think I heard a lot of other people mention 14, 30, and 20. I think those are likely to land on our list for sure.
Thank you.
There's the superintendent as well.
Yep. Just let me finish this one here. Paul, do you have your top four readily available? I just want to make sure I captured them. Oh, okay. I got them. Thank you. All right. Superintendent.
So I'm going to break the rule a little bit and not give you a number, but give you the concepts that the staff discussed as still remaining significant for us as we watch legislation, which tie to many of the ones that you've already all shared.
Okay. Can I ask if I could have a board member be an interpreter of what you're going to say and a number?
Okay.
Who wants to be that interpreter for me?
Prototypical school funding, so the fully funding. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Versus, yeah.
It's really the staffing levels, because the current model is, needs to be updated.
11. Thank you.
The clarification on the SEB, I know the legislative priority in WASDA talks about fully funding it. We're hoping that in that fully funding discussion, there will also be clarification.
And fully funding of 7 pensions is 42.
Yeah.
I had that on
I have
my
a feeling
short
you're
list.
not going in sequential order in
Sorry.
terms of numbers. That's fine.
You're going to have to adapt.
Yes.
And the, I believe it's the number 1, the equity. Is that the equity? Or, I'm sorry, that's the academic
rigor.
rigor.
And
Yeah, that's the one.
Is that it? Wow, okay. Well, thank you, everybody. All right, we could either break for 5 minutes, I'll give you a tally, or you can live painfully through this while I tally it up.
Do you mind if I introduce the emergency proposal while you tally that up? Just give
Sure.
kind of a,
Yeah.
for everyone. Okay, so moving over, oh, sorry. I believe also attached in here is draft language for an emergency proposal. That came out of Yakima School District, I think, and this arrived in my inbox this morning. And with a request, with an emergency proposal like this, it would require 4 districts to sign on as signatories, which means it could move to the floor and be considered as a part of prioritization, adoption, or amendment. It's not something that the Legislative Committee looked over, but it was brought to us by a member of the Legislative Committee, Martha Rice, who's been with the Legislative Committee a long time and has served on her school board either 20 or 28 years. So she kind of knows her way around. But so the language is in there, and it's not a link, it's just plain text. And so this is a last-minute addition, so there is no need for action on this at all tonight. It sounds, from what I've been seeing, that they may already have enough support on this that it'll most likely make it into Legislative Assembly. So the question would be, is there any interest in supporting this tonight? Would you have interest in moving this over to the next board meeting, which would be just a day or 2 ahead of Legislative Assembly, to maybe amend to your priorities, or put as a fallback? Sometimes our priorities are knocked out or removed by the floor. Legislative Assembly is a really exciting time where delegates from across the state get together in full-on parliamentary procedure and and set priorities and adopt and amend language. So it's fun. It is my Christmas. What's the one from Seinfeld with the staff?
Festivus for the rest of us.
It's more my Festivus.
Got it.
Anyway, so it's, with a chance to look at that, it's really up to the board as to whether they would like to potentially take action or move this on, or maybe just take no action, let it run its course. I don't have a specific opinion on this. I just kind of shuffled it onto the superintendent and Director Jorgensen this morning as it hit my inbox. And it's in there for anyone watching, but it would deal with readdressing or auditing essentially the prototypical school funding formula, so staffing levels and all of that.
I think it makes a lot of sense, just like so many of these legislative proposals make so much sense, and it's hard to believe some of them have been standing for many years without actually getting processed through the legislature. It's really hard to prioritize one's top 15, and this looks like a really good one, but
I think the big challenge with this one is it overlaps 3 different policies that are already there. So one policy is to fully fund the prototypical school. There's another policy around mental health, and there's another policy around special education services. I mean, this lacks the school safety issues, which has a policy. So I don't think the right strategy is to combine them in this way. It doesn't help with prioritization or clarity in the legislative process, would be my concern about this. I do think the idea of if they had stopped at just regularly review and revision prototypical school funding formula in order to reflect the needs of students, schools, and districts, I think that would be great. And then everything else could be cut off.
It's what I actually really like about it is I think the fundamental, I mean, I think the fundamental flaw of our funding system is the inappropriate and unrealistic prototypical school funding formula. And which I know you're not, I mean, don't disagree with, but I think that if the prototypical school model is appropriate and accurate and meets our kids' needs, then the other things fall into place. And I think that since, at least currently, unless they change the entire funding model, this speaks to the legislature's language. They fund based on the prototypical school model. So if we want to see funding changes, they need to understand how much their school funding, their prototypical school model actually lacks providing basic education. And I don't disagree with you in terms of, like, it can be dangerous to give examples and not everything. I mean, so I don't disagree with you on that at all. But I really like this because I think the prototypical model is where we need, unless we're going to do tax reform, that's where we need to hit them.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, trying to do 2 things at once. I appreciate that it's there. I am hesitant about voting to support this when it's just brought to us within a few hours and we haven't had the opportunity for the public to give us feedback. It's likely the public's not going to give us feedback, but I won't want to support something that is a kind of a little bit last minute. And I don't think there is a timing issue with respect to this necessarily right now. So that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't foresee a timing issue. It seems as if it's going to have the support it needs to move forward to Legislative Assembly. Okay, so on that, yeah, I guess there'll be more information if you'd like to adjust it at the next meeting with your final priorities list or anything, if you want to add that on or put it as a backup, potentially, or if you'd like to challenge the language in some way on the floor. Otherwise, it will have its own life. Cool. Director Jorgensen, did that afford
There's
you
always
enough time?
next year.
There's always next year, that's right. And rambling on to give Director Jorgensen more time.
Feel free, please.
It's always good to remember that, which was new to me this year. I didn't realize this. So any of these new proposals that are brought have to be brought back every year. If somebody doesn't bring the proposal back as a returning proposal, then it disappears and has to start the process in life again down the road. So the Legislative Committee has an opportunity to revive these things in their committee meetings over the summer leading up to it, but so that's good, especially with certain things that we are signatories on, like comprehensive school safety and gun violence reduction, that we want to keep our eyes on it and make sure that they're being resubmitted each year if they're still aligned with our core beliefs.
Has there been any legislative outcomes as a result of policies from these three groups, the superintendent's group, the director's group, I think the education organization? Do we know of any legislative legislation that has been enacted as a result of these?
That's hard to measure. I know that there were several articles written, and certainly Senator Wellman was a huge supporter of our students going to the Hill last year to speak to these legislative priorities. She said it was really impactful. Representative Tai also mentioned that in articles, that really appreciated the students' time coming to represent these. And really, it's not just a matter of, there's our guiding issues as WASDA, the Washington State School Directors Association. And so the priorities that we establish really gives that government relations team the teeth that here's really what we want you to go to. And they will assemble the armies of people to testify and do that based on those priorities. But all 123 of those are actionable at any time and are always there ready to go. So what these do essentially is when a question comes up or a committee is considering a piece of legislation or an amendment, these inform WASDA as an organization of how they can speak to it and the will of the members. And we are the largest group of elected members in the state of Washington. So when we align together as a group with making these statements, it really gives that government relations arm some power to go in and influence.
Okay, so everybody got a pen and paper, because I'm gonna involve you in ordering this as well. I am just gonna put down numbers that had more than one vote, if that makes sense. So, I think I'm gonna try. Number one is, what do we want to call it? Resolution 1? You want to call them resolution? What do you want to call them? Proposal 1? Proposal 1 had 6 votes. Proposal 14 had 5 votes. Proposal 30 had 5 votes. Proposal 16 had 4 votes. I heard that 38 and 53 were similar, so I kind of counted them together. So 38/53 had 4 votes. Okay, now I'm down to the 3s. So number 42 had 3 votes. Number 19 had 3 votes. 27 had 3 votes. 33 had 3 votes. 108 had 3 votes. How many have I given you? That's 10. Do you want to stop there? Because then we go to the 2s.
We go to, we take 15 priorities with us to Legislative Assembly.
Okay, so. Okay.
I think we prioritize 15 and we have 5 extras.
So I'm hearing you want to hear the 2s. Okay. So number 15 had 2 votes. Number 73 had 2 votes. Number 11 had 2 votes. Number 17 had 2 votes. Number 24 had 2 votes. Number 28 had 2 votes. Number 49 had 2 votes. And number 68 had 2 votes. What does that give us in terms of a number 18?
I felt like 12, did you say 12? No. the gun violence safety stuff, I feel like choosing the best one is appropriate, and I think there's at least 2, if not 3, in this list. And I mean, we all agree that it's a priority, but I just don't know that it needs to be 3 times a priority. Personally.
And in that, there's 15, which is the firearm-free schools. So that specifically
6.
speaks to blocking any legislation that would loosen the current restriction on firearms on school properties. Whereas the other one, gun violence reduction, speaks to services and education and community and those wraparound services that go with reducing violence and specifically gun violence, if that makes sense.
I would tend to think, those things got the votes. Yes, we can consolidate it down, but I would hate to dilute that weighting, especially since the students, that one was included in the students, at least the concern about gun violence. And so right now we're at 18. That's pretty darn close to 15. How about we let that one just fly in to the people who are attending the conference, and there may be 1 or 2 that get consolidated or 1 or 2 that are dropped. We save a little bit of time. And I should also say I have a work conflict, so I'm not going to be able to attend. I briefly talked to our president, and you are going to be attending? Okay.
Yeah, I will be there
Thank you.
facilitating as a member of the legislative committee, but can also carry that delegate card unless somebody else would like to go and carry
No,
the
I
delegate
just
card.
was curious who was going. And I
That was a
think
very
that's
fast no.
great. I did enjoy it when I was legislative rep, and I think it's a great, I appreciate you, both of you carrying on this role in leading our discussion about our priorities, because I don't think this was done for a while, at least before I came on board as legislative rep. So I think it's great that we're doing this.
Thank you. 2 thoughts. One is, should we take this list and boil it down to whatever the top 5 were, or whatever and share that with the city? I think sharing 15 with the city might be a little bit overdone, but they do want our input because they're going to be making their priorities. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but maybe there was a clear cut from where we went to 6 to 5 to 4.
Yeah, there's a clear cut 5.
Okay. And then the other thought, our student reps, have they gone to the past to this meeting, and are they invited and welcome if they're interested?
So we're only in our 2nd year with student reps, so the answer to the first part is no, they have not attended. We did have the experience with our student reps last year at the Day on the Hill it was the rescheduled one because of the snow, which was a really great experience for them to actually be on the Hill and working directly with our legislature. So the plan is to have our student reps attend that again, as well as attend on the WASDA conference on the Friday and hopefully the Saturday in November.
Also, this year, Legislative Assembly is in Spokane for the 2nd year in a row, which is unusual, because what WASDA is now doing is they're flipping them. So every year, Conference and Legislative Assembly will be on opposite sides of the state. So next year, they'll move, so Legislative Assembly will be in Bellevue and Conference will be in Spokane. And then back the other way, which makes it more equitable for everyone across the state. And both events offer tracks for students and student panels, and there'll be lots of opportunity for our students to share their voices at these events, which to me have been some of the most powerful panels and breakout sessions that I've attended since starting, is when the students get up there and share their voice. So.
And our students can come to the legislative conference, or not the WASDA conference in November. So that's, because that'll be in Bellevue, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then also there's not to confuse it even further, but then there's, the legislative conference, there's the annual conference for WASDA, and then there's the legislative conference, which is the School Directors Association, business officers, and superintendents associations all get together and choose their top 5 or top 3 and then 5 sections in each, which is the day on the Hill, where we meet with the governor and the leaders of all the organizations, and then we storm the Capitol the next day, which was really great to have the students with us last year for that. So, yeah.
I just wanted to excuse myself. I have to go home and start my AP homework, but thank you guys for such a warm welcome, and I had a good time. I mean, I'm getting a little comfortable, so I was a little quiet today, but I appreciated it. I just enjoyed it. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
It's great having you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion about priorities and all that? Okay. Then we will move on in our agenda. So, let's see, where are we? That moves us into Section 3, Full Governance Process Monitoring and Language Review. 3A is Board Policy 1800 OE4, Staff Compensation. So, let's see. We are determining compliance in this, and we can do this all in one fell swoop. I don't think this is, yeah, we can do this all in one. So the next item has one L2 breakout. Is there a preference for going point by point through this, or if you'd like to approve all in one fell swoop or find compliance?
I move we find the whole report in compliance.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, then the motion is to determine compliance with Board Policy 1800 OE4, staff compensation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Superintendent is found in compliance of 1800 OE4. And now we'll move into 1800 OE5, which is staff evaluation and instructional practices. This is mostly an L1 monitoring, but item 2 is an L2 monitoring. So would the board like to hear L2 first? Okay.
All right. For several years, we've had L2 or level 2 on section 2, which is really how are we providing coaching and feedback to staff. Obviously, every staff member in the district is evaluated annually, but this is really speaking to what does that look like. And from a historical perspective, just a reminder, you know, it was really clear back in the 2013 time period, 13-14, when we were first launching TPEP, the Teacher Principal Evaluation Program. Since then, we've really stuck with the Danielson framework for our instructional framework for our school district. That's something that has actually been in place since the 2008-2009 school year, well before TPEP was a requirement. As a reminder for the board, there was one change we made for administrators. These are principals and associate principals in our building. There were two choices that we could go with, either the Marzano instructional framework or leadership framework, or the AWSP, the Association of Washington School Principals. We had originally adopted Marzano, and then 2 years ago now, we made a switch to go with AWSP. The state has since, and I'm glad we made that switch because they since discontinued the support of the Marzano work. So AWSP is our only model now. You can see in the report that our principals, they take on the role of being a coach, a facilitator, a mentor, an evaluator, and it really is about trying to meet the needs of all of our staff members. And instead of thinking about the tool as the guide, it's really what does the staff member, what do our certificated staff members need to be able to make professional growth. When we do training using the Danielson framework, we've used actually teacher trainers in our model. with the Train the Trainers. Nova Williams has worked hard over the last several years to make sure that we have a cohort or a cadre of teachers who help lead that work. And we find that to be beneficial and important because we want the teachers and certificated staff to see their peers as role models in this. And it's not all about evaluation all the time. A lot of time, what we're really looking at is that professional growth and professional improvement. In the quantitative report, then, we have a number of just indicators for you in terms of how are different staff members evaluated. There are two main evaluation systems as a reminder. There's the comprehensive system or the comprehensive cycle or the focus cycle. And the comprehensive is taking the 8 criterion that the state established, and in that given year, then the certificated staff member is evaluated in all 8 categories or all 8 areas. They provide evidence and feedback and reflection as part of this process, working with their principals. And then the principal is also reciprocating that. So it is quite an intensive process. If you're in your first 3 years in the profession or have not taught before necessarily, you are on it for 3 years with that 3rd year with a couple other requirements. And then depending on where you are, you might have 1 more year of comprehensive, but then you go on to focused. And the focus then allows the educator to just narrowed in on 1 of the 8. Regardless of which evaluation cycle you're on, there is always student growth goals associated with it. 3 student growth goals if you are on comprehensive, and 1 student growth goal if you're on focused. So in order to be on focused, you do have to have of the 4 criterion, which is distinguished, proficient, basic, or unsatisfactory. You do have to score proficient in order to move on to that focus cycle. So that's kind of a piece to that. So you can see at each of our schools kind of the numbers of teachers who are on the different cycles. When we first rolled this up, we started with kind of a 4th, and 4th model, trying to get all of our staff members kind of evenly spread, but then attrition happens and people move in, and so it's all out of whack. Here we are in 2019-20, but you can see the 18-19 kind of where we were there. So there's a number of other descriptions in there, but I'm happy to take questions.
How do the teachers feel about the framework?
The feedback that I've received is the framework for teaching, the Danielson framework, is well received. I think that's mutually shared between our principals and our teachers. It is a nice rubric that really lays out the what we're all looking for and what we agree is effective instruction and teaching and learning. What it doesn't do, and it falls a bit short of, is the how. And so it's not a framework that's going to tell a teacher, if you are proficient, here are the key things you have to do in order, here's how you get to that next step. There are indicators in there, and so I think that's a shortcoming. I would say by and large overall, though, if we shift from the framework and talk about TPEP, the model continues to be probably more of a barrier to improvement than it is a true growth model, because there's so many boxes to check and processes to follow. It's hard to keep track of all of that, and we're talking about, if a teacher's in their 3rd year, I have to do an extra 30-minute evaluation, and it's 30 continuous and not on this, and I have to have these. So there's so much red tape within the process that it can get in the way of making it work the way it's supposed to, which is how do we make all of us better? And that goes on the principal side and on the teacher side with that. So that's been one frustration that I think isn't just germane to Mercer Island, but we've all struggled with since implementing it. That might be something you talk about when you have your linkage session with MIEA, is maybe some of their feedback, but at least that's what I hear. I think we've been conditioned long enough now that everyone just kind of understands it, and okay, we just need to move through this. There are times when it's very useful, though, when we're trying to work with a teacher who maybe isn't meeting our expectations. But it's, in the end, it's not always the tool that really helps. It's really the conversation. It's the relationship. It's the ongoing discussion. So I know Superintendent Koloski and I have talked about this a lot, and she's been, we've grappled with it. I don't know if you want to jump in.
The framework is a great tool for teachers and principals to be using. I think it was originally designed as a coaching tool. And has now been turned into part of the TPEP, which is an accountability and compliance model, and in some ways an unfunded mandate, which then puts everybody in the compliance mode versus the growth mode, and how are we looking at the framework. The standards within the framework align very well with other standards for the teaching profession in other models. I think it's, as Fred mentioned, the compliance piece of it is what sometimes becomes a barrier.
Other questions, comments?
Initially, when you presented the report between Washington State and Mercer Island, the OSPI reports, our teacher longevity wasn't as high as a state average. Is that what it was saying?
It did. It had the state average at 12.9 and ours at 12.0. So a little bit.
Yeah. I'm curious. So we've got a different framework clearly than the rest of the state. Are there reasons for that discrepancy that relate to evaluation?
I don't know for sure. My hypothesis would be no. Every state had 3 to choose from. You could choose the Marzano framework for teaching, Danielson framework for teaching, or what they call CEL 5D, which was out of the University of Washington. So everyone has a specific framework for teaching, but all of those funnel to the 8 criterion. And so the way the 8 criterion are mapped back to those frameworks is different, but all of the districts have that same expectation, and it's all governed by RCWs. So I don't think that it's the evaluation process that is the factor, would be my hypothesis.
I was wondering how we compare to other school districts in this evaluation process, and if, I don't know, streamlining it, or maybe making it student-centered and somehow targeted towards excellent teaching is a way to differentiate the Mercer Island School District from other school districts in the hiring and recruiting process. Do teachers look at these processes, and do they differ much from district to district? And could that or has that made a difference in recruitment?
I don't know about the recruitment side. That the questions that we see at recruiting fairs, time and time again, it's not necessarily how I'm going to be evaluated or what's that going to look like. It's how are you going to support me, and what does your professional development look like? That's what the candidates are asking, because they can be more picky than ever right now, and they can say, what are you going to do, Mercer Island School District, that Bellevue isn't going to do, or in addition to them. So that's really where the recruiting comes down to. It's not about how they're evaluated. Very few candidates ever ask about evaluation. They go right to, how are you going to develop me and support me, because this job I know is going to be hard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none. Then the action at hand is determining compliance with Board Policy 1800 OE5, staff evaluation and instructional practices. We could do that all in one felt swoop, I believe, now that we've discussed number 2, or we can break them out.
I move we find the superintendent in compliance of all of OE5 staff evaluation and instructional practices.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of finding the superintendent in compliance with Board Policy 1800 OE5 staff evaluation and instructional practices indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the superintendent is found in compliance. With that, we'll move into section 4, our consent agenda. And I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do you need
Second.
Okay. All right. Any discussion? No. Okay. Then all in favor of approving the consent agenda indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Well, we had a director step out. Okay. We will move on with the consent agenda is approved. This time, if you'd like to afford the Vice President 5 minutes, we could take a break or we could continue with the meeting. What?
Sorry, maintenance, for practice.
Okay. The consent agenda was approved. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on to section 5, superintendent's announcements.
Actually, none at this time, other than a reminder that there is a second home football game tomorrow night and the second part 2 of the band halftime show.
Questions? Comments? Seeing none, let's move to section 6, which is board announcements, inquiries, and reports. The first thing up that we have in there is 6A, would be school liaisons and establishing that for the next year. This includes PACs as well as various councils, advisories, and such. With the board shifting and changing this year, maybe a brief discussion about kind of how we feel about that. And as we divide those positions, I think offering some insight on that would be great. And then we can move on to pleading and divvying up and gnashing of teeth. Any insights that anyone would like to offer?
Don't forget your facilities review committee, which was to be added here.
Is it officially the Facilities Planning Committee, the FPC?
Yes, sorry.
Seeing no comments, I would suggest that we look to some of the lighter commitments as we kind of plan this in preparation for the board shifting and makeup in December. We can certainly reassign some of those positions, but for continuity for our schools and staff and students, probably best that we take that into mind as we divvy up.
So, for those of us who are outgoing, in more ways than one, of course, will be replaced by one of the new board members, and may make sense just to have them by position number. I'm not sure. Like the person replacing me would then take over my duties for the school or the council or whatever I end up on.
I think that's the assumption.
Okay.
Yeah. And so how we take that into account now is assigning
Yeah.
the two of you specifically.
My only input on the school liaisons is that there's one that I can't do because of conflict, and one that I have not ever done in my time. I've done all the schools except for one. So unless somebody wants to take Islander Middle School, I would be happy to step in on that and then have my replacement take over, because I could do the first 2 of the PAC meetings on the list.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you.
what was the date new board members are seated? Is it 12/5 or something like that?
The second Thursday in December.
Yeah, it's like the.
Okay, so like 12/11
Yeah.
or 12. Okay.
As far as the school liaisons go, I was just my scheduling. I'm currently, I did IMS, so I don't feel the need to do it. I was really more looking at the times and days of the week that would work for my schedule. And I would just say Island Park or IMS, and I'm happy to not do IMS. I really enjoyed it. So I would like to do the Island Park, frankly, well, which I haven't done, and also based on the schedule.
Say that again. Which one? Island Park. I'm okay with that.
I just finished Lake Ridge, so I probably shouldn't do that again. And I have done West Mercer, and I have done the middle school. I could do the high school. I could also do Northwood. Either one, if anybody else has a preference.
Northwood only meets 3 times. I did Northwood and IMS this past year, and that was not overwhelming because of the times that.
And someone has to do 2.
Yeah.
So Northwood is a good one to have as the second one.
I've not done Lake Ridge and Northwood, so I could combine those. I'd be happy to take those on. I'm intentionally sidestepping West Mercer for at least one more year.
Yeah, that sounds, the high school overlaps with Northwood.
Okay, so you good with the high school?
Yeah.
Everyone's okay with that? So that leaves West Mercer. Director Jorgensen?
Unfortunately, with work, the only one I could probably do would be Island Park, but I'd only be able to do that will only be relevant for 1 or 2 months or 2 meetings, and then I'd be off the board. So, yeah. I'd very much like to do any of these, but I'm just kind of saturated right now, except for that 4 p.m. time slot. But totally respect Director Lurie's schedule as well.
I could do a second one, and then it could just get divvied up between the 2 new people. They can decide
Are you sure?
for themselves. Yeah, it's only 2 meetings at West Mercer, right, before we're off.
So just to clarify for the record, Lake Ridge will be Director Janini Upton, Island Park, Director Lurie, Northwood, Director Janini Upton, West Mercer, Director Drinkwater, Islander Middle School, Director Drinkwater, and Mercer Island High School, Director D'Souza.
That's what I have. Okay, so now we move on to the next, what is this, 5, including the facilities. So the first one up is PTA Council. Or it's PTA Council, Superintendent Community Advisory, Superintendent Equity Advisory, and Superintendent Teaching and Learning Advisory. So we could open that up for discussion around this one. And then the Facilities Planning Committee, FPC. All right. Gonna have to get used to that.
I'm happy to do PTA Council.
I'd like to participate in the planning. What did you just say? Yes, SPC?
FPC.
FPC.
I'd be happy to do the Equity Advisory Council, and then one of the new people would make a great fit for that. If that's okay with lack of continuity, but I've never served on it.
I've kind of been wrestling with that
Yeah.
myself. The first 6 months I served on the Diversity Advisory Council, the SDAC, as it was kind of being retired out. And then the last year serving on the SEEK, which was really building the foundation and finding the why and the mission. So I would be interested, if the board would allow it, to continue for one more year on
Sure.
that, to watch it actually move into action.
That's fine with me. The only one I couldn't do was PTA Council or the FPC, since I'll be stepping down.
Brian and I just talked briefly because I expressed interest just between the two of us on the Equity Advisory Council, and am interested and am happy to defer. But I was able to attend the district training today that not all of us were invited to, but as part of the Equity Advisory Council, because I had expressed interest, and I'm not going to do it justice by explaining it, but Brian and I were talking just briefly after that it was it's a training that's including the school site equity groups as well as the superintendent's advisory group, and found the training today to be really enlightening, and in terms of the information that was presented, the way that it was presented, and also having the opportunity to interact with but administrators, teachers, parents, all at one time, and a lot of small group work in a way that kind of with guards down, in a way that at least I haven't really experienced before. So I would just love to be able to participate in that activities like that without needing to be part of the advisory.
One of the things I've tried to do in the updates when I've given them to the board is put the upcoming events. And I think that at any time you wanted to come in to any of these committees to listen, observe, I think that that's an open invitation to any of them. And, we always have to watch out for too many, but when there aren't decisions being made and it's just to observe what's happening in any of these advisories, you are welcome.
Okay, so that leaves the Community Advisory and the Teaching and Learning Advisory.
And one more person for the facilities.
I would be happy to work on the facilities as well.
When is the facilities, do you anticipate them meeting? Do I see it here, or is that?
You do not see it here. Those dates have not been set. We anticipate working with Malum to select those dates, as they are the ones that lead to that group. That remember that there is no staff on the Facilities Planning Committee. We certainly facilitate from the backside. So we anticipate the first meeting would occur in November, and then probably a second in December.
I was going to say, if there's one before I term out, and if it was after 4 o'clock, I could attend that, but I also don't want to get in the way of Director D'Souza on that.
My understanding is they will be evenings. There'll be 3-hour meetings. Probably a 6 to 9 time would be what I would anticipate. I have no idea what day of the week.
There's something to be said for the consistency of having people.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, and not to take away a request, but the first meeting is likely going to be after the election, and while a new member isn't going to be seated, to be able to participate in a meeting for the purpose of continuity, I don't see that as a problem. But since we have someone who wants to participate, I just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think for continuity purposes, it makes sense for Director D'Souza to go for that.
So I'll volunteer for the Superintendent Community Advisory.
So that leaves the Teaching and Learning Advisory.
If if Ralph can't do it, I'm happy to take that on until we have someone new and then pass it off if they desire. Or is,
Yeah, I can't do it.
yeah. And if you'd like me to do that. And I could either keep it or pass it. It's, you know, whatever someone else might want.
Does that work for everyone? Do you have that?
I think I have these all laid out. So our PTA Council rep will be Director D'Souza. Our Superintendent Community Advisory, at least for the first meeting, will be Director Drinkwater. Our Equity Advisory will be Director Janini Upton. Our Teaching and Learning Advisory, at least for the first 2 meetings, will be Director Lurie, and then potentially moving to a new director. And then our Facilities Planning Committee will be Directors Lurie and D'Souza. Thank you.
There was one other question I got today, but I defer this to you, Director Jorgensen, Legislative Representative Jorgensen. So we have 2 new legislative advocacy reps at PTA Council level. So they weren't sure who was continuing. I said that's something that's set in December, typically with officers. And so are you able to continue with that? And yeah.
Depending on when they have their meetings. If I can't make it, maybe I'll ask you to attend.
I'm happy to, or anyone else who would like to do that. But yeah, the question came up today from the 2 reps who were at the training as to who they should reach out to. And I said, you should reach out to Director Jorgensen, but so be looking for that. Cool. All right, any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Then we will move into announcements and reports. And connected with this, was added to our agenda is a piece from Director D'Souza. So I'll turn it over to you.
This is just for information at this point. The idea is we would bring it up for discussion if the board wants to. Maybe we'll decide that at the next meeting after you've had a chance to read this. But the idea is to have some communication that is clear to the public as to what the expectations are when communicating with the board. And many other districts have this on their website where they publish information, the mailing list for the board, as well as information about how to come to a board meeting and communicate, give public input to the board. And so this is a synopsis about what to expect, covers the issues around individual issues. It covers issues around staff member issues. Those should be done in private, or student issues should be done in private. If you come in front of the board, the idea is you're giving input, you are not having a dialogue with the board. And if you wish to have a dialogue with the board, you're best off following our mutual trust and responsibilities list, which is to talk to the teachers, principal, superintendent first, and then have a dialogue through email or phone call with board members. And this was the general sense that I found in a bunch of other districts. So this is all there in one place for you to review, think about. If you have any feedback, you could shoot me one mail. I will not respond back to your feedback. And then next meeting, we can have a discussion perhaps if we want to put this on the calendar to talk about or do this in a study session at an upcoming study session. Okay?
If I might, just for frame of reference, so the board policy that refers to public participation at board meetings is Board Policy 1430. So as you're looking at that, you might reference 1430 BP for what is current standing in policy as well.
Thank you for putting this together. I think it looks really good. I just was confused when I first read it because it starts by talking about the email and then it seems to talk about public input, but I didn't realize that. So maybe just at the second paragraph state then regarding public input, something like that.
That's fair.
That's the only thing that's missing as I can see, but I really like what you've done with it. Thank you.
I guess there was no need to really have deeper discussion here at the moment. So if I have no other announcements other than this.
No announcements or anything.
No announcements other than I look forward to seeing the new logo design, and probably a little known fact, that logo was designed by an artist that was commissioned by the 1983 senior class officers to go on to the what do you call it, graduation announcement. So that was just a student-led logo that over the years ended up being the district logo. So it's kind of interesting.
I was just going to comment on, and what I already commented on in terms of the training today, and really just encourage. I mean, it was great, and thank you for that opportunity. And what was I going to say? I do know that, because it's close to my year, that the 1989 reunion, 30-year reunion, is coming up in a couple weeks. I think next month. Do you not know about this?
Our alumni coordinator knows all about it.
Absolutely. So I just happen to know because I'm the year behind. I've got one more year till it. Mine is, but it's coming up. So if you've got those big anniversaries, a lot of alumni activities are happening in the next month or so, and it's pretty fun to attend. And just think that it's been a really great first week of school. I don't know if there's been little fires to put out, but there's certainly, I haven't heard of any big fires to put out, which is always, one way to measure success. So just looking forward to a really great, fun, productive school year.
Yeah, it's been a big 3 weeks since we last met, so a lot going on. It was great to meet new teachers coming to the district. The Vice President and I were there to welcome new teachers at their orientation and to see all these great folks joining the family here in Mercer Island. It was also wonderful to serve the barbecue. I think that's a great event, get a chance to meet everyone on the staff and thank them for returning. And I did get to see a sneak peek at the technology conference. What was the term that you're with the teachers? The
Instructional Technology Day.
Instructional Technology Day. So my daughter was, the principal at West reached out to see if she would participate in a student-led kind of project to welcome teachers in. And so students were lined up and were given small sheets of white paper and medium poster board and large poster board, and each had different segments of focus throughout the district at different levels of intervention. And then the teachers all in their packets had, or the staff had, arrows. And so the students were led into the auditorium and kind of surrounded them at the Performing Arts Center, the high school. And Jamie Prescott was there, Executive Director of Learning Services, and said, so your learning group and community, take your arrow and point at what your group is working on this year. And the small sheets went up and arrows went everywhere. And they pulled up the medium posters and said, now point at where your focus is, and arrows are going everywhere. Said in big posters, arrows going everywhere. And she said, now all the students come up on stage with me. And all the students walked up on stage behind her, and she said, now, what are your focus priorities this year? What is your team focusing on? And all arrows went straight to the students. And that's when she rolled out the new mission, vision, and values, and students are our priorities. So I got to peek in on that because Wilder was involved, but I had not only a proud papa moment, but a very proud school board moment as I watched the beginning steps of our new mission, vision, value policy 1 in full force. And I just thought that was a brilliant example to watch all of those arrows point to the students and use that as a kind of an anchoring point. It was very moving for me. So applause to the district and everyone for, that was pretty slick. Also working with the training on equity, this is a really great training that we're attending today and the next Thursday. This is through the Puget Sound Educational Services District is facilitating this, and it's specifically for leadership with racial equity. So it's a very challenging conversation. It was a full room of people there from all different aspects and stakeholders. And I thought that there were people taking some risks and being very vulnerable, living in that awkward space of a difficult conversation. And it gave me a lot of hope for where we're moving as a community. And the thought of community and a family, not only in the district but in Mercer Island, was something that came up. And to hear that reference tonight with our special education directors, I think, was a nice touchstone. So I won't be here at our next meeting. I'll already be in Spokane, working with the leadership WASDA and then the Legislative Committee and then Legislative Assembly. So Vice President Lurie will be in charge of the next meeting. And if I am going to be the delegate, or whoever the delegate will be at Assembly, you have a chance to reprioritize all of that and be sent out. The final voting and prioritization doesn't happen until the last day of Legislative Assembly. So there's one more chance to kind of work with that as a board. Other than that, I think that's everything for me. Are there any other announcements, inquiries, or? Then we're down to Section 7, adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion?
The thunder just
Yes.
gave a second as
Yeah.
well.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Any abstentions? No? Okay, then we are adjourned. Please stick around to sign paperwork. Thank you. It's 8:52.
The band is outside too, right? The-